All right, good evening. What is up? Welcome to the inaugural episode of On High Hoops, a new Big East podcast with a Johnnies focus. Hell of a day to start this pod as a Johnnies fan coming off the 103-96 loss to the Crimson Tide. Tough loss, no sugarcoating it. You know, when you have a top 25 opponent in your building, that's a game that you really want to win. Those are the games that you can go ahead and really get a quality resume line and have a little easier go of it at home than in a neutral environment. We'll have one more of those home opportunities when Ole Miss comes in December. But other than that, if we're going to get a big non-conference win, we're more likely to get it in a neutral site, Kentucky, Baylor, Iowa State, and whoever our third game is over in Vegas. Zuby Ejiofor, led all scorers, 27 points, 10 boards. Hopkins added 19, Sellers and Jackson 14 apiece. Quality offense. I don't think offense was the problem here. The problem here, obviously, the defense. Anytime you give up 103 points, that's problematic. But the sky not falling. We're still here. Still got, like I mentioned, 5 opportunities to get more than one. We're going to need more than one quality out of conference win. If you go 3-3 across those top 6 games, the 3 in Vegas, Ole Miss, Kentucky, and yesterday's loss, I think that's more than enough for the out of conference. Go 8-3 there, get something like 15 wins in your conference, and you're going to be a top 5 seed line probably. So I think that's 5 would be a little lower than we wanted. So hopefully we can win 4 or 5 of these out of conference games. Maybe win more Big East games than 15. But just a little baseline there and a little conservative. Forecasting. Let's call it. So again, that's not to say there's not problems here. The defense was definitely problematic. But I have a hot take here. My hot take, defense wasn't as bad as some of the panic and certain people would have you believe. I think having rewatched the game and my immediate gut impression, you have 2 really, really elite guards on Alabama in Holloway and Philon. We forced them into a fair amount of bad shots. A lot of really contested ones at the rim. There was a couple in the second half especially that were just absolute circus finishes with Holloway and Philon contorting their bodies around Zuby or Prey or Mitchell or Io to try to get in there and get a clean look at it and kiss it off the glass or finish it with a teardrop over 2 defenders, outstretched and upreached arms. So you saw things like that in the second half. The other problem, of course, those guys were getting to the rim to get in those situations, to make those circus finishes, to make those really good finishes, because they were, blowing by the guards. But before we get there, I want to talk about rebounding, because I think rebounding was a problem for us yesterday, and I think it actually was a problem in the Quinnipiac game as well. I tend not to deep dive on cupcake games, but sometimes when you look back and you see what happened in a real game, you start to notice some cracks that were showing up originally in those cupcake games. And so yesterday Alabama just absolutely killed us on the offensive glass. They had 14, I think, offensive rebounds, and that's just it's not good. I tend not to focus on counting stats because in a game like this where there's a ton of possessions, you're just going to see a lot more counting stats, a lot more turnovers, a lot more rebounds, a lot more assists, etc. But what you do look at here is you look at rebounding percentage, and that's the amount of rebounds that you're pulling down on either end. So take their offensive rebounds, our defensive rebounds, and turn it into a percentage. So they had a we had a defensive rebounding rate of 69.6%, and that's just simply not good enough for a team that, was the second best defense in the country last year, for a team that aspires to be a top 5, 10, 15 team in the whole country this year, and that aspires to have a defense that good especially. You just have to be better than that on the defensive glass. And so, Alabama had those 14 offensive rebounds, and off of those rebounds, they had 19 second chance points. So that's inexcusable. Some of it, I think, was a little bit of bad luck, and that's, a lot of long rebounds. That'll happen when you play a team that shoots as much as Alabama does. But there was also plenty of poor positioning and poor handwork and, all those types of things that can bite you when you're attempting to rebound the ball. And I think also rebounds doesn't even capture the full essence of this issue, because there was times where there was loose balls that were bouncing off guys' hands, or that we weren't in position to get, or we deflected the ball but couldn't steal it, and stuff like that as well, that I would kind of put in this category with defensive rebounds, of just a thing where you've got to be in position and know what you're doing, and have the good hands to secure the ball. And so, like I mentioned, this is a recurring problem. Against Quinnipiac, we only snagged 67.4% of the defensive boards, so even lower percentage against Quinnipiac, which is pretty bad. They were not a particularly tall team, and the big guy they had wasn't the most athletic. So that's just inexcusable against a team like that. And between the two games, our D rebounding percentage 68.5. That puts us in the 50th percentile in the country, and per CBB Analytics. And when you're a high major team, 50th percentile in any stat is not good. When you're a high major team, you need to be in the top quarter of percentile of most stats. Obviously, every team's going to have some weaknesses, but we have a front court that's supposed to be our strength. You have two fantastic rebounders in Mitchell and Zuby, another really good rebounder in Bryce, and so you just got to find a way to be better at rebounding. Some of that is positioning, some of that is Nate Oates is a great coach and does a lot to build mismatches and to take guys away from the rim and hunt those good looks, an NBA style. So there's some of that to it, but there's plenty of times that guys just got boxed out on, or we're just otherwise in bad position. And just to circle it back to Quinnipiac, they actually had the same amount of offensive rebounds as Alabama. They both had 14 offensive rebounds. Quinnipiac only scored 10 second chance points, and I think the moral of that story is an obvious one, and one that really don't need stats to back up, and that's good teams are going to punish your mistakes. So we made the same mistake against Quinnipiac and the same mistake against Alabama, and obviously only Alabama punished us for it. So, it's definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward. We've got, 2 get-right games coming up, and so, we'll have to look at that defensive rebounding percentage and, see if we're doing better than we did against Quinnipiac and certainly against Alabama. The other thing I already mentioned, poor perimeter defense. We really had a hard time staying in front of Philon, Holloway, Right Cell. A little bit of it was some game planning. There was a lot of Dylan Mitchell on the guards, and I thought it was, pretty clear in the first half that might not be the best idea. I think sometimes with the quicker guards, smaller guards, you can stifle them with length, and a guy like Mitchell, who is fast enough to guard the perimeter against most teams, and who has length that can stifle some guards. But these are not those guards. They were lightning quick. They were too quick for Mitchell. They were blown by him, and frankly, I just I was questioning that. Sticking with that. Similarly, the second half, we saw a lot of IO on Philon. Listening to the broadcast when I was rewatching it, Donnie Marshall kept trying to politely point out the issue there, and that's not a knock on IO. I think IO is giving us really good minutes in a lot of ways, and I think he's going to continue to give us good minutes, and he's definitely a leader for this team. But like 99% of college basketball. He really struggled to guard Philon and Holloway and keep them in front of him. So he got blown by a few times in the second half as well. And again, just a an interesting decision to go with those guys on them. I think personally, Jackson looked the best defensively because he's the quickest. He's the most athletic of our guards, and so I thought he did a better job, a little bit better job than Sanin. Interestingly enough, I thought Poto did a pretty good job of bottling the guys up when he came in for his 2 minutes, but he didn't look like he could or was at a point in his career yet where he can give us anything offensively. So I think that's probably why you didn't see more of him. And we all know Rick. And freshman, he just does not really like to play freshmen, and that showed up yesterday with Odie not getting any run. The other curious one here, I mean, not so curious in hindsight, but Lefty did not play, and I say in hindsight because the more you think about it, it's I don't think he's the quickest guard either, so I think he would have had some trouble defending the quick guards of Alabama. No Lefty. Interesting decision, though. I think we could have maybe used a little bit of his shooting. And we'll touch more on the shooting in a little bit. But, so no Lefty, no Odie. Just about everybody else that was available, I think, got in the game. I think Poto only played 2 minutes, but he made the game. Tamba did not. The walk-on did not. Lefty did not. Dylan Darling, not there. Obviously, when we're talking about guards and perimeter stuff, you're going to talk about Darling with this team, but I don't know that he makes much of a difference yesterday, and I'm a guy who's high on Darling. I really like Darling, and I think he will do a really good job of facilitating the offense. Defensively, I think he's scrappy, and I think he can get in guys' pockets, but I ultimately don't think he is quick enough either to keep these guards in front of him. I think, Sanin and Jackson were the two guys that could really compete athletically and defend those guys. So that's just my 2 cents on it. But there's definitely some thought out there that maybe Darling could have improved the offense a little bit more and not cost us much defensively, or impacted the game in other ways that might have made it a closer affair, or even given us the win. And I think part of it too is just it's part and parcel of the game plan and the system this year and the recruiting philosophy, putting aside the fact that we didn't really recruit a true point guard. What we did recruit was a lot more scoring and a lot more shooting. And, when you do that, sometimes you have to sacrifice defense, right? There's only so many guys that can, defend at the level of a Kadari Richmond and also score at an elite level and shoot and, be a well-rounded player. Those guys in college are rare, and they cost a ton of money, and we had a ton of money to invest elsewhere, and a lot of needs to fill with all the seniors that we lost. So I think part of the plan was to build a really good front court, and if you sacrifice a little bit on the perimeter defense, and those guys get beat a little bit more than our guards last year or RJ last year, you have Dylan Mitchell, Zuby, Prey, Hopkins inside to protect the rim. Obviously, I don't think none of them are elite shot blockers by any stretch, but what they all do very well is guard that, guard the rim, for lack of a better phrase, and kind of alter shots at the rim, like I was talking about earlier. They did a great job, I thought, of forcing tough shots out of Alabama's guards inside, and so that they do that very well, and I think that was part of the construction of this roster, was to get that scoring on the perimeter and maybe sacrifice a little bit of perimeter defense versus what we had last year. This is a tough game to judge the wiseness of that roster construction strategy, just because it's a game built to expose. It's a team and a roster that Alabama has that was just kind of built to expose a team that was constructed in that way, with how athletic Philon and Holloway are and what good shooters they also are, and Right Cell too, for that matter. You're just not going to see a team with you might not see a team with one guard as good as Philon, and you're certainly not going to see a team with two guards as good as Philon and Holloway. So, we'll see how that pans out moving forward. But I also think, yeah, I mean, I think I said all that on top of, Philon and Holloway were really built to expose that. And I think the other part of this too yesterday was Dylan Mitchell, not his best performance. He had hands of stone out there. There was several defensive rebounds that kind of bounced off his hands in various ways, and obviously they're in traffic. They're not clean rebounds that are bouncing off of his hands, but those are the kind of rebounds that he usually squeezes. Those are the kind of rebounds that he's built a college career on nabbing and being that physical, tough presence inside. And I don't think we saw that, or at least we didn't see the hands to go with it. We did see, he was still in there mixing it up. He just wasn't able to squeeze rebounds yesterday, and you saw it on the offensive end as well. There was at least 3 that I counted plays where he received the pass that should have or would have been a layup or a dunk. One of them might have been a little low from Zuby, but still, it's the kind of pass that, sometimes comes in a little low when you're in the low post, and you got to find a way to grab it and get up. And I think, all 3 of these passes that he bobbled and lost would have been points. And so that was, just another little notch there with Dylan yesterday. But, he had the tough assignment of trying to guard Philon a lot. And I think, when you're asking a guy to do that, it can wear a guy down. It's hard to keep up with a guy that's fast, that active, that moves that much. And I think that's another aspect of the perimeter defense is just, if you think about this program, this team last year, right? When we were watching them in the non-conference, the defense was good, but it didn't have the level of, chemistry that you saw later in the season when the defense really became locked down, where they were switching everything perfectly and switching back and, doing all of the things just in seeming perfect harmony. You don't see that yet. There's sloppy switches, which is what we saw, to start the season last year to an extent. And I think there's, times where, they were missing switchbacks, for instance, and that would leave Zuby or Ayo or Mitchell on one of their star guards, and obviously, Alabama or any team is going to try to exploit that mismatch, and they did it really well. We also did not defend the pick and roll very well late in the game, especially the last 7 minutes or 6.5 minutes when after we had that 1-point lead with 6.5 to go. They ran the pick and roll several times, and it looked like we had never seen a pick and roll before. So, that'll come. They'll figure it out. Rick Pitino is one of the best coaches of all time and an elite defensive coach. It took time last year, and, I have faith they'll figure it out again. It's just going to take some time again. You're going to have to wait for these guys to build their own chemistry. And to figure out the switches and the system for themselves. And again, mentioned earlier, 2 get-right games coming up. So, you've learned some things about yourself yesterday. And so now you take that into the next 2 games and work to fix those mistakes in a low-stakes environment in a game again, a couple of bye games. Offensively, I think things offensively were fine. 96 points, you can't complain about that ever. I think I tweeted out the stat that this is only the second time in program history that we've scored 96 points and lost. I also shared the stats around top 25 teams scoring 96 points and losing, and newsflash, there's not a lot of them. St. John's, the only other time that they did lose when they scored 96 points was in 1971 when they were 8th in the AP poll at the time. So a little bit of odd and interesting correlation there. Yeah. So, it's not all sunshine and daisies. Obviously, I think there was some things you'd like to see cleaned up. I know a lot of people are talking about free throw shooting. I get it. It was not great, but when you look at the overall percentage, it was 70%. I think if you shoot 75% as from the free throw line as a team, you're a pretty good free throw shooting team, especially when you have a guy like Mitchell who's not the best shooter. I would sign up for 75% on the season right now. They shoot 75% yesterday. That's 2 more points. But I think the reason why free throw shooting stuck out to a lot of people is because we shot 81% or 82% in the first half, and closer to like 60 or 55%, I think, in the second half. And obviously a lot of key free throws in that second half that we did not make. There was a couple of times where we were 0 for 2 on a trip to the line. And so those sort of things tend to jump out. And, you obviously want to see the guys make those free throws down the stretch when it counts. And whether or not the pressure was getting to them or the nerves or whatever, who knows? We'll see. But, I think that's just a little bit of an anomaly. And, there'll be games where we shoot poorly in the first half and make every free throw down the stretch. And, that's the way it goes sometimes. And I'm not worried about the free throw shooting overall. But I am worried about offensive rebounds. So we talked about the defensive rebounds. Offensively, we're just not getting many rebounds at all. Once again, if you look back at the Quinnipiac game, this is something that reared its ugly head in the Quinnipiac game as well. Offensive rebounding percentage in that game was... Did not have this one queued up. It was like 40%, so it wasn't terrible, but it was not great. Yesterday, we had a really bad. We were really bad on the offensive boards. Only 25.6% offensive rebound percentage, which was 28%, which would be 28th percentile nationally. So obviously nowhere near the offensive rebounded team that we were last year. I'm a little flummoxed by that one. I'm not sure what the issues are. We had a lot of balls, again, bouncing off of hands on the offensive glass, just like the defensive glass. So there was a little bit of that for sure. But I think we had there was a lot of Zuby, a lot of prey on the perimeter, even a little bit of Mitchell on the perimeter, playing point forward at times. And so, I think that was some of the problem on the offensive glass. I think also, Alabama's a great transition team, and so, I think, the guards were not crashing the rim the way we're accustomed to seeing, like last year's set of guards, and so, I think that hurt a little bit. But what are you going to do? I don't think you can have the guards crashing into the boards. It would lead to too many wide open, easy buckets on the other end for a team like Alabama. So, I expect this number will get better as well. Obviously, with Zuby and Mitchell, and I think the guards will hopefully start to contribute a little bit more on that offensive glass. Just looking here, not a single offensive rebound from a guard yesterday. Just one for Dylan Mitchell, 5 for Zuby, and 1 for Bryce Hopkins. So that's something that you want to improve upon, and it's a strength that this program had last year, pretty much large part due to Zuby. And Zuby's always been a better offensive rebounder than a defensive rebounder, I think. He seems to do a better job on the offensive glass last year. So I think this one will probably clean itself up a little bit, but definitely something to track and to monitor as we go into these next 2 games against Bucknell and William and Mary. The next issue I saw, 3-point shooting. And you might say to yourself, wait a minute, Frank, St. John shot 35% from the 3-point line. Why is that a negative? Well, we'd have been a Sweet 16 team last year if we could have just shot 35% from deep. So, I think there's some logic to saying, we shot 35%. That's great. But we're a much better shooting team this year. I'd still be happy with 35% if this team shot that on the season. But the issue is, it's like, with great talent comes great responsibility. We have better shooters this year. We have the ability to shoot 35% or better. You need to use that. You need to use that ability and take 3-point attempts. Last night, St. John's, or not last night, yesterday afternoon, St. John's took just 17 3-point attempts. That is far too few, especially in a game with that many possessions. A game where St. John's attempted 63 field goals. To have just 17 of those be 3-pointers is abysmal. If you look at Alabama, for instance, 81 field goal attempts, 35 of them 3-pointers, and they did that despite only shooting 31% from 3. So, you got to scratch your head and wonder why we were not taking more threes. We did shoot a lot of mid-ranges. We actually shot pretty well from the mid-range yesterday. I don't have the exact percentage, but it wasn't terrible. But a bigger issue was just not shooting more threes. You've got the guys, and the other issue with it is who is making those threes, right? So, Ruben Prey was the leading 3-point shot taker. He took 5, made 2. Great. I would sign up. I'm sorry, he took 6. No, he took 5. 5, made 2. And that's fantastic. I would sign up for, 40% from deep from Ruben Prey this season. If you read my preview on the On High Hoops blog, I definitely touched on that. Because of this crowded front court, I think there were some people who were maybe overlooking Ruben Prey a little bit, and I think he definitely has a big role to carve out when it comes to being a front court piece that can be a reliable 3-point shooter, that can open up some spaces, that can spread the floor for Ian and Sanan to get to the rim so that they can, keep their defenders off balance, whether they're going to shoot a 3 or drive, which is something that, you saw firsthand with Alabama's guards yesterday. You can't, sag off them and cheat to the rim because they're just going to pull up and shoot, and they're going to make those shots when they're open. And that's what we need from our 3-point shooters. That's what we need from our guards, and that's why I think Ruben Prey has that role to play where he can spread the floor from the forward position and help make that room for the guards to really become, all level scorers. But having him be the leading 3-point attempt player on the roster yesterday, that's not it. That is simply inexcusable. Isaiah Sellers. This man came here, I think he shot 40% last year at Stanford, or maybe just under it. He is here to be a shooter. And maybe this is where the point guard thing comes into play and would have helped a little bit. Maybe if Dylan Darling's here, he can distribute and get some open looks for Isaiah Sellers. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of this boils down to the point guard situation, I guess, to a certain extent. Again, I think the offense as a whole sort of did really well without the point guard. We're kind of nitpicking on the offense here when you score 96 points. But, I think what I've gathered from watching Isaiah these first few games is that he needs to just be a 2-guard. He might be the next best ball handler and point guard on the roster after Dylan Darling. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's that much difference between him and what I've seen from Jackson or from, the Bryce Dillon 2-headed point forward monster. And I think you're just going to have to use a rotation of those guys. But Isaiah Sellers is probably the best shooter on this roster, or maybe, him and Ian pretty close. You need to get Isaiah Sellers the looks that he's comfortable with. You need to get him, you need to get him some shots that are makeable, get him into good positions, catch and shoot stuff, and really get him going from beyond the arc, because that is why he's here. He's not here to play the point. He's here to score from behind the arc. Josen Sannon 1 and 2 from deep. Like it, love it, want to see more of it. Bryce Hopkins took 3. I'm fine with that. I think that's probably a decent attempt number for him, 3 to 5 a game. But obviously, don't want him to go over 3. Need him to hit at least 1 or 2 of those a game. Shoot around 33% or so. I think would be good for him. Zuby, again, thrilled. That was again something else I touched on in the preview blog, talking about Zuby, and his sort of next steps. What would that next step look like? What ways could he improve? 3-point shooting, definitely one of those areas. So, encouraging. But again, him and Bryce, you have 2 forwards and a center, 3 forwards, however you want to call them, were your 3 leading 3-point shooters yesterday. That is not how this offense will win games. It's simply not. They need to get their guards shooting 3-point shots. Better shot diet. And I think, overall in the shot diet, yes, we hit the mid-ranges yesterday. Yes, last year we were an elite mid-range shooting team, even though we couldn't hit from 4 feet further back in the 3-point land. But you gotta hit the threes. You gotta stop taking mid-ranges. Eventually it's going to bite you. They're low percentage shots. Metrically, they don't make sense. And I think, you can get those shots anytime you want. And so it's especially frustrating when you see them happen early in a shot clock in a big situation. We were in the middle of a run, I think, and Isaiah Sellers comes down, pulls up, 8 seconds into the shot clock from 20 feet. And it's like, what are you doing? They're giving you that shot for a reason. Why are you taking it? You don't have to take that shot. Definitely don't have to take that shot 8 minutes into the shot clock. Get into your offense. Do something. That early in the shot clock, it should be a 3, or you get to the rim. Otherwise, you reset and look for something better. And so, that was just especially frustrating. That example, far from the only one, but that example, because Isaiah Sellers is a veteran. He should have a little higher basketball IQ, and that was just a particularly frustrating moment in the game from my perspective. So, I think that kind of covers all the points that I wanted to hit regarding yesterday's game. Another thing I wanted to talk about a little bit here was more of a big picture thing, and I don't want to particularly look to the future in the second game of the season, because obviously nobody's saying the season's over. It's 2 games in, and we still have a long way to go, and we're still on track to get where we want to go. Yesterday doesn't change that. But big picture, one of the things that struck me yesterday, which is why I'm talking about it now, is the continuity that Alabama has, right? 4 of their 5 starters were on this roster last year. I think they were the second, third, and fourth per game point scorers. Wrightsell only played whatever it was, 6 games or 8 games, but he was in the top 4, along with Holloway and Philon. So, continuity is important. And I don't think you need to go to the Shaka Smart extreme where you are eschewing the portal completely. But when you look at the best teams out there, what they are doing is building a core and supplementing it with players from the portal. That's what Danny Hurley has done so well over these few years run that UConn has had. You look at a team like Florida, they're doing the same thing. Michigan, similar. So you really got to have more continuity than bringing back, one starter and one rotation piece in Prey, who, only played like 8 or 9 minutes a game last year. And so, moving forward, that's what I want to see, right? There's plenty of guys here that will have eligibility next year. Obviously, Jackson and Sannon are going to have their eyes on the pros. But you really, I think we need to, I think the program should be looking at it and saying, is bringing in Isaiah Sellers, a guy like Isaiah Sellers cold off the street, from another program, making him learn our system, etc., is that better than us getting another year to develop somebody? Would it have been better to hang on to Jaden Glover and develop him another year. And I don't know if that's possible. Maybe Jaden Glover just wanted out. But those are the kinds of questions that need to be asking. It shouldn't just be, oh, that guy's more talented, we got to go get him. Is he going to be better in the system? Is he going to be able to learn the system quickly? Or, maybe nobody can learn our system quickly. I think we're seeing it 2 years in a row now where, the defense is not as tight as you want it to be with the switching, which requires a lot of chemistry and a lot of IQ and a lot of knowledge and experience in the system. So for me, the continuity is going to be key, and I would like to see, a lot more of it next year. And I think even having guys around the program like an Imran Soljanovic, who's obviously injured, but, he's around, he's watching film, he's probably sitting on the sidelines in practice. Even that just helps somebody who's learning the system and seeing it every day and watching the film on it to come back next year and be a part of it. So, I think we've also had some structural issues with continuity as well, just because, you look at the first year, you had nobody except for Soriano, who was a senior. You bring in a bunch of seniors and then replace them with a bunch of seniors. And so, we do have a couple of guys we have more than a few guys this year that will have, that'll have plenty of eligibility left at the end of the season. Jackson, Sannon, Ruben, Lefty, Casper. I'm sure I'm going to forget some people, but, Imran, I mentioned, Odie, another guy who didn't get any run yesterday. So, you'll have those guys there. You'll have the opportunity to sort of build more of a core from the inside and, supplement it with pieces from the portal. And I think that's the ideal model. It's not, it's not reload 9 out of 10 rotation pieces every year. And it's also not the other extreme of Shaka Marquette completely ignoring the portal. It's, build continuity, keep the guys that you want to keep, and, bring in a few pieces, 2, 3, 4 pieces at most that can supplement your rotation or fill a need in the starting lineup and kind of build the roster that way. So, again, I'm fine. I don't think the sky is falling. I think this team is going to be fine. There's some things to clean up, but it's Rick Pitino. We saw this last year, as I've said several times. We saw the defense take some time to gel last year, and that became the number 2 defense in the country per Ken Palm. I don't think we're going to be top 2 this year, but I definitely think we'll be a top 25 defense, maybe even still a top 15 defense. And I think the offense is going to be light years better, and I think we're seeing it already with the performance yesterday. So, they'll work on the things. They'll go back. They'll look at the tape. They will, try to build some more chemistry on the defensive end. And as I mentioned, 2 get-right games coming up. Next Saturday, we'll get William and Mary in Carnesecca Arena, 6 p.m. on Saturday. So hope nobody had any Saturday night plans. I'll be there. Probably grab a drink at Nico beforehand. Nice Japanese beer. And yeah, I'm looking forward to Vegas. We'll have, 2 really good games. I was just still watching Baylor over here. They're taking care of business by 5 points over Washington. Minute and a half to go there. So, they're going to be looking good coming in. Iowa State is another really good team. And I think Iowa State will be a pretty good barometer of how well we've corrected the errors that we saw yesterday defensively. They have some great guards themselves. Taman Lipsey is a baller. TJ Otzelberger, one of the best coaches in the country. I think if anybody remembers back the olden days when we had bad coaches and I was assembling wish lists of coaches I wanted to hire for St. John's, all the way back, I think in 2015, I had Otzelberger on my list to replace Mullen. He was still at SDSU at the time. not San Diego, South Dakota State. So he's always been a coach I thought highly of, and I think he plays a great system. He coaches phenomenal defense, and he usually has some really good guard play. So I think that those guards will certainly present some issues for us. And, if they're not as good as the Bama guards, that's for certain, but it'll test whether our defense has improved on the perimeter. And so that'll be the Tuesday when we're in Vegas in a couple weeks. So this podcast, going to do some St. John centric episodes. You see Johnny's edition up there on the top. And then I'm also going to do some general Big East episodes. I'm going to try to do 1 or 2 episodes a week. I'll probably recap most big St. John's games, and I'll want to try to do like a weekly Big East recap roundup kind of thing. And every week I'm going to do what I call the Schadenfreude segment. So every week we're going to check in with, one or more of our former conference mates to see how things are going for them in their new basketball conferences. This week, let's talk about Boston College, currently sitting 95th in KenPom after losing their opener in overtime at Florida Atlantic. I mean, kudos to them for going on the road, I guess, for a home opener against a mid-major, but, there's a reason high majors generally don't do that. So you obviously learned that lesson, BC, but don't worry, BC came back the next game and beat the Citadel 341st in KenPom, beat them by 29. They're not going to play a high major opponent until 12-3. I didn't even care to write down who that was because I really don't care. But let's see if I can pull that up real quick. Oh yeah, they're playing LSU. So one of the worst high major teams in the country probably this year, LSU. Probably bottom 2 or 3 at best in the SEC. So, kudos to BC for scheduling tough. Kudos to them for, probably finishing last in the ACC this year. I'm sure this won't be the last time that we check in with them on the Schadenfreude segment. All right. Last piece here. I like handing out game balls, game MVPs. So St. John's, obviously I didn't do anything for the first game, so let's hand out game balls for both the first 2 games. I think it's pretty obvious who gets the game balls in both of them. The first one, Dylan Mitchell, 18 points, 7 boards, 2 assists, 4 steals, and a block in 26 minutes on a super efficient 7-9 shooting. And he played phenomenal defense. He showed off his athleticism on both sides of the court. And so, he really wowed the crowd and made a lot of fans that opening night at Carneseca. Yesterday, again, pretty obvious who was the MVP yesterday. Zubi Ejiofor, 27 and 10, double. 3 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals, 9 of 12, pretty damn efficient. 2 of 3 from deep, love to see that. Also want to just give an honorable mention, shout to Ian Jackson. I thought Jackson was phenomenal in that second half. He was 6 of 14 shooting. Off the bench, he had 14 points, 3 assists, and had that one really nice block in the first half coming from behind on, I want to say right cell, but I could be wrong. Next up for the Johnnies, William and Mary, Saturday, 6 p.m., Carneseca. I will see you there. Let's go, Johnnies.